The middle school class that I work with is an extremely small group of just 3 students. Their English levels are all very similar, so I've listed them all as having level 3 English proficiency. While we did hand out questionnaires at the beginning of the semester in order to gauge our students' likes and dislikes to use in our lesson, I decided to go another route. Being a math-focused educator, I decided to teach something in my subject area. After speaking to Mrs. Bortner and the students about the math classes and what they were learning, I decided to focus on some mathematics vocabulary and simple conversions regarding fractions and decimals. In order to control their note-taking, I provided a note sheet with fill-in-the-blank opportunities. They were instructed on the words to fill in and sometimes given correct spelling as needed. I used the fact that my classroom had a large whiteboard to my advantage, writing some of the words on the board as we went along. I gave students opportunities to speak, reading from the note sheet aloud. On top of that, within sections of the notes there were fill-in questions presented. This allowed me to gauge the students' progress and knowledge throughout the lesson. After explaining a fraction and giving some examples of different forms of 1/2, such as 2/4 or 3/6, students were allowed to give some of their own examples. Let's see how they did.
With those three is that they're all actually the same exact number. Okay, so we have 1/2, 2/4, and 3/6. So the thing that makes them all the same is that the top number is exactly 1/2 of the bottom number. Okay, so they can all be what's called reduced, and that's where you put it in the final form of just 1/2, because it's the lowest possible numbers. Okay, so if 1/2, 2/4, and 3/6 is all equal to just 1/2, then what are some other ways to write it? I left a little blank right there, so you guys could try to write some other ways. So, like I said, the top number is half of the bottom number. That's what makes it 1/2.
4/8.
4/8, that would work. What's that? Which one's that?
5/10.
5/10. Anyone got another one?
6/12.
6/12, exactly. And all of those are all equal to the same exact number. Jasmine, you want to read the second line? Want to read right there?
Oh, the top of the fraction.
Next, I followed my given sheet and defined 2 more words quickly, numerator and denominator. I soon found out that they had experience with both of those words prior. In the simplest way possible, I explained the conversion from fraction to decimals to the class. The simplest way I knew how to do this was to define decimals as fractions with a denominator that was a power of 10. When this was the case, I explained to them the process of moving the numerator to the right of a decimal.
They're only going to say the numerator and the denominator.
The importance of decimals was stressed in terms of the continuation of their mathematical knowledge, as well as its relevance to money.
Okay, so now,
Again,
fraction,
there were a few blanks after the notes, with a few questions that allowed me to gauge the students' knowledge and understanding of my lesson.
billion, as high as you can go.
Once deemed necessary, I moved on to the next phase of my lesson, the worksheet. Through my own educational experience as well as prior field experience, I have found that students best understand math through individualized but guided work, meaning that they can sit and wrestle with the problem conceptually while I ask them questions that guide their thinking in a certain way, with the eventual goal being that their mind makes the conceptual leap themselves. So, I had created a worksheet with 2 separate questions that would evaluate the students at the end in order to ensure that the goals of my lesson had been met. Throughout my semester, I have found that my few students seem to have higher speaking and listening levels and lower reading and writing levels. Thus, the questions were originally read aloud to ensure understanding. Then, the students worked on the problem individually. The first problem is as follows.
When the birthday cake was about to be served, you were told you could have 0.6, 7/10, or 4/800, which would give you the most cake.
I watched the students as they started to write on their papers and noticed that they were all taking the steps that I expected them to take, attempting to write them all in the same form, being decimal or fraction. However, once they were all written down, they still couldn't make out just which one was greater. This was an unexpected speed bump to me. After attempting to explain how 0.7 was greater than 0.48, even though 7 was smaller than 48 through math terminology about the tens and hundred spots next to a decimal point, and seeing all these blank faces in response, I decided to go another route. I drew a cake on the board, and I cut it into 10 pieces. Then I shaded in 7. I did the same for 4/800ths. The students seemed to respond to this, thus making it a successful part of my lesson. The second problem is as follows.
Sam loves basketball and said that for every 10 shots he takes, he makes 8 of 10. Using that, how many baskets would Sam score if he took 50 shots?
I gave the students a few minutes to think about strategies and maybe even begin to decipher the problem, and what I saw was great. The students had different tactics, from writing out every shot to making the jump to recognize cross multiplication. Once I brought them back together and started to slowly explain more about cross multiplying, the students remembered it and started to finish it themselves. Since it seemed they had grasped that one easily, I gave them 2 more quick problems that they could complete regarding our character Sam. The students took their time but completed the problems with ease, and thus concluded my lesson. While my class size was small, I think a larger class size could provide some difficulties, potentially breaking them up into smaller groups as they work on the problems could provide them with the necessary help that will get them through the problems.